My fingers brushed against soft fur instead of her arm. Kinia went still, ears burning red, tail trembling in my grasp. For once, the playful fox girl didn't have a clever remark ready. Only silence filled the space between us. The barracks of Pharaoh's 9 were never truly quiet. Wind tore through half-built walls, dragging with it the bitter sting of desert sand. The air was always dry, coarse, and restless, much like the soldiers who lived there. Humans and vulpine fighters cursed the dust, cursed the food, and eventually cursed each other whenever the shifts dragged too long. But under the flicker of ration lamps and the creak of metal supports, you learned who you could trust. Darius Hall had expected nothing but boredom when his boots first touched the cracked floor of the outpost. Drill, patrol, eat, sleep, repeat until rotation was over. That was the plan. But the universe had other ideas. Captain Arden had told him curtly on arrival, no spare bunks. Half the prefab units are still off-world. And that's how, on his second night, Darius found himself sharing quarters with her. She was sprawled across the narrow bed opposite his, a vulpine with fire-red hair, ears twitching lazily, her tail curled like a flame. She looked at him and smiled, a spark of mischief in her golden eyes, as if she already knew she was going to be trouble. "Don't look so serious, soldier boy," she purred, dragging out the word boy like a challenge. "You humans take everything too seriously." "Not serious enough to avoid volunteering for this dump," he muttered, dropping his pack to the floor. "Guess you drew the short straw too." Her laugh was quick and sharp. "Kill me a Vera," she said, tapping her chest. "But my friends call me Kale." "Darius Hall," he replied, pulling off his vest with practiced detachment. He'd learned early that vulpines liked to test limits, and he wasn't in the mood to play. Kale rolled to her side, tail flicking idly. "Looks like we're bunkmates." "Lucky me." The room was barely large enough for one person. Two bunks pressed tight against opposite walls, a single locker squeezed between them, and the stale breath of recycled air hanging over everything. Darius had hoped for a quiet corner, maybe time to read before lights out. Instead, he got her. The next morning set the pattern. He woke to the sound of rustling near his locker. Kale crouched there, tail swishing like a metronome of mischief, holding up his ration bar. "You snore," she said, biting into it with tiny, sharp fangs. "That's my breakfast," he growled. "Correction, was," she teased, brushing crumbs from her lips. "You humans eat like birds anyway." By the end of the week, Darius learned one thing: Kale didn't know how to leave him alone. She brushed her tail against his arm as she passed, leaned against his shoulder during briefings, whispered smart remarks during drills that almost made him laugh when he wasn't supposed to. At night, she hummed haunting vulpine lullabies, her voice lilting and sly. And when he groaned and turned away, she'd poke his back with a gloved finger. "You're too stiff," she'd say. "Relax." "We're not at war in here," he'd mutter. "We're always at war," she'd answer softly, and her laughter would drift through the darkness, somehow warmer than the cold wind outside. One evening, after a long patrol that left them both half dead with fatigue, Kale dropped face first onto her bunk. Her tail draped across the floor, brushing dangerously close to his boots. "You know what your problem is, Hall," she mumbled into the pillow. "I'm sure you'll tell me." "You never smile," she said, peeking at him with one golden eye. "Not even when I'm hilarious. I'm here to serve out my tour, not to be your entertainment." "Too late," she said, grinning. "You already are." And she wasn't wrong. Against his will, she became the spark in every dull day. By the second month, Darius stopped wondering why me and started wondering what next. She found endless ways to irritate him, hiding his boots, changing his datapad settings to vulpine script, even doodling little paw prints on his reports. Whenever he confronted her, she'd just grin and shrug. "Lighten up, soldier boy. You'll live longer." Maybe, he thought, she was right. Life in Pharaoh's 9 settled into rhythm. Harsh drills at dawn, scorching patrols at midday, sleepless nights in thin-walled barracks. But somehow, Kale made it unpredictable. One morning, he slid on his left boot, and felt something heavy. He pulled it off and found a chunk of scrap metal wedged inside. Kale leaned against the doorway, arms folded, a smug sparkle in her eyes. Strong enough to march like that, soldier boy? He threw the scrap at her. She caught it mid-air, laughing. You'll trip one day, he warned. And you'll catch me. That's how this works. She tossed it back into the hall like it was a game. During weapons checks, she mixed up their rifles. He didn't notice until his grip felt wrong. Kale's tail swished as she watched him realize. Yours? Mine? Same. Difference, right, she teased. Try that in a fight and see how funny it is, he growled, though a smirk betrayed him. That smirk became her mission. At night, when the barracks dimmed and others drifted to uneasy sleep, Kale would lean by his bunk and talk about home, vast forests of sapphire trees, glowing lantern markets, and skies split by emerald auroras. Her tone softened when she spoke of it. You'd hate it, she said once, eyes glowing gold in the dark. Too loud. Too alive. Sounds better than this wasteland, he admitted. She smiled faintly. So, you do listen. Hard not to. You never stop talking. That's because you never say enough, she murmured, tapping her tail lightly against his bunk like a heartbeat. On patrols, their uneasy companionship turned into instinctive teamwork. Kale moved light and silent, while Darius trudged through sand and armor. But somehow, they matched rhythm, her sharp eyes spotting threats, his steady aim covering her. Once, a sand serpent erupted from the dunes. Kale flipped aside with reflexes like lightning. Darius's rifle barked once, the beast fell before its fangs reached her. That night, she lay sprawled across his bunk again, tail dangling. See? You do like me alive. You make it hard to argue. Get off my bed. Not until you say please, she teased, stretching lazily. I like when you say my name like that, rough, irritated, very human. With a sigh, he dragged her back to her own bunk. She went willingly, still laughing. Their banter became the talk of the barracks. Sergeant Lurax, a scarred Vulpine veteran, smirked during mess. Didn't think a human could handle Kale's games, he said. You've got patience, or a death wish. Patience, Darius replied flatly. She means, Kale interrupted, biting into her rations, he secretly enjoys it. Darius didn't bother denying it. One night, she stole his datapad, perched on the top bunk, and began scrolling. You keep journals, she teased. Oh, this is adorable. They are mission logs, he said, reaching for it. MMH, this one says, the dust never stops, but neither do we. How poetic. Give it back, Kale. His voice was low, warning. She leaned close, tail brushing his shoulder. Say please. He lunged, snatched it from her hand, and dropped back onto his bed. She collapsed into laughter, rolling over. You're more fun than you pretend to be, she said between giggles. As days blurred into weeks, something inside Darius shifted. Her teasing no longer burned, it warmed. He found himself listening for her humming, waiting for her sarcasm, noticing the way her tail flicked when she laughed. And when she was gone late with her squad, the barracks felt strangely empty. She noticed too. That night, she sprawled across the walkway between their bunks, tail deliberately in his path. You'd miss me if I was gone, she said softly. You'd miss bothering me. Same thing, she whispered, and for once, there was no laughter. That night, when she hummed quietly beside him, he didn't turn away. He just listened, to the sly rhythm that, somehow, had become the only thing in Pharaoh's 9 that made him feel human. On patrol, he learned something else. Kale wasn't just a trickster. She was a soldier. In the dunes, she moved like a blade, precise, fierce, and fearless. Her ears caught sounds he couldn't hear, her eyes sharp as any scanner. During one long-range sweep across the southern flats, she froze mid-step and raised her hand. Darius stopped instantly. 30 meters ahead, the sand rippled. Then a burrowing drone burst from beneath the ground. Kale was already in motion, vaulting high, plasma blade flashing as she slashed its exposed core. Darius fired once, sealing the kill. The drone collapsed in a smoking heap. She landed lightly, dust streaking her cheek. "Not bad, soldier boy," she called. "You left it open." "I made it open. You just had to shoot." Her grin widened. "See? Teamwork." He couldn't help but nod. That night, she retold the story to her squad, full of flair and exaggeration. Darius cut through the smoke, eyes narrow, jaws set, like a holodrama hero. I nearly swooned. The table erupted with laughter. Darius kept eating, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Kale saw it. She always did. Later, back in their quarters, she leaned against the wall as he cleaned his rifle. "You like it when I brag about you." "I like accuracy." "So you don't look like a holodrama hero," she teased. "Too bad. I almost believed it myself." He shook his head, but she smiled, pleased to have drawn that tiny reaction. As days went on, her antics grew bolder. She claimed his bunk during rest breaks, perched on his locker while he changed, narrating each move just to annoy him. Once, he came back from the showers to find her wearing his jacket, sleeves hanging past her hands. She turned dramatically. "Well? Do I pull off human fashion?" "You're stretching the seams," he said, tugging it off her shoulders. "Maybe I'll keep it anyway," she teased, brushing invisible dust off the fabric. "Smells like you, stubborn, tired, but steady." The words lingered longer than he wanted them to. At night, she leaned over from her bunk, hair brushing his shoulder. "You're always so still," she whispered. "How do you not toss and turn?" "Because I'm exhausted." "Or maybe," she murmured, tail brushing his blanket, "you're afraid you'll bump into me." He turned his head, narrowing his eyes. "Do you ever stop?" Her grin flashed in the dark. "No. And you'd miss me if I did." He wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. The silence without her would be worse. In the field, their bond showed. When sandstorms swallowed the horizon, she stayed close, a steady presence in the chaos. When an ambush left his squad pinned, she darted through the smoke, dragging him clear of a collapsing ridge. Later, beneath the battered awning of their transport, she leaned against him, ears flattened, dust clinging to her fur. "You owe me," she whispered. "You'd have done it for anyone," he replied. "Maybe," she said softly, eyes bright even through the grit. "But I'm glad it was you." Kale's tail kept brushing his arm until he finally rolled toward her. "Kale," he groaned, voice rough with sleep. "What?" she asked, all feigned innocence, her tail looping lazily in the air. "It's a long night." "Then sleep," he said. "But you're more fun than sleep." She leaned in so close that one ear grazed his cheek. "Tell me I'm wrong." Darius stared up at the ceiling, fighting the tug of a laugh. He refused to give her the satisfaction. His silence only delighted her more. One particularly sleepless night, she jabbed him in the ribs over and over until he tried to catch her hand. She skipped away, laughing. "You almost caught me," she taunted, crouching at the edge of his bunk. "You're going to regret this," he warned. "Promise," she shot back, eyes sparkling. He didn't answer, and part of him wondered if he meant it. What unsettled him most were the shifts that came in quiet moments. After hours of antics, she sometimes folded in on herself, tail curled close, ears tipped low. Once she caught him watching and offered a rare, small smile. "You humans hide behind stone faces," she said softly. "We hide behind mischief. Same purpose, different mask." He didn't reply. When he finally shut his eyes, her tail traced his arm again, light, deliberate, almost tender. By the third month of sharing a room, Darius expected Kale the way he expected the rattle of the vents or the grit that crept into every seam of the outpost. She was inevitable, part nuisance, part comfort, always orbiting just near enough to unsteady him, never close enough to catch. She tested limits with almost military precision. If he sat to clean his rifle, she hovered over his shoulder, chin a breath above him. If he tried to read, she sprawled across his bunk and pretended to be enthralled by whatever scrolled across his datapad. If he dared ignore her, her tail would curl over his forearm, dragging soft fur against his skin until he relented. "You don't even flinch anymore," she observed one evening, flicking her ears. "Most humans would have shoved me off by now." "Maybe I'm waiting to see how far you'll go," he said dryly, sliding the bolt back into place. Her grin sharpened, delighted. Dangerous words, soldier boy. During a late patrol, a storm forced them into a ruined survey tower. Kale sprawled on the broken floor, tail wrapped around her like a blanket. Darius sat opposite, eyes on the doorway, rifle within reach. "You never talk about home," she said, her voice almost swallowed by the wind. "Nothing worth mentioning." "You're terrible at lying," she countered, propping her chin in her hands. "You get that look, eyes far away, like you're somewhere else." He hesitated. "It wasn't much. A small farming colony. My family grew grain." Kale blinked, then laughed softly. "You? A farmer? Before the draft?" Her smile turned gentler than usual. "Explains why you're so steady. Roots in the dirt." When the wind finally eased, she stood and brushed dust from her armor. "Maybe someday I'll tell you about my home properly, but only if you keep letting me win." "When?" he asked. "What?" She let her tail flick against his knee as she passed. "Everything." Back in the barracks, her games escalated. She began slipping into his bunk outright, stretching the full length while he tried to push her back to hers. "Kale," he said one night, bracing an arm across her side to stop her rolling closer. She blinked up at him, eyes glimmering. "Yes. You've got your own bunk. But yours is warmer." She flicked her tail across his chest, then slid back over the narrow gap, grinning all the way. She also perfected her timing. Just as he hovered on the edge of sleep, a gloved finger nudged his shoulder. If he ignored her, the pokes became rhythmic until he growled and rolled over. "Persistent, aren't you?" he muttered once, catching her tail as it swept his arm. She froze for half a heartbeat, then flicked free, ears high. "Careful," she warned, smiling with more excitement than anger. "That's a dangerous game." He studied her, but she only stretched lazily and turned away, humming under her breath. The change in her became impossible to miss. She was still mischievous, still relentless, but there was something pulsing underneath. Her gaze lingered longer. Sometimes her laughter carried a nervous edge, as if she was testing not just his patience, but his restraint. One evening, while he filed reports, she leaned over his shoulder again. This time, she said nothing. She simply rested her chin lightly on his pauldron, tail curling along the back of his chair. The quiet was more unsettling than her chatter. "What?" he asked at last. "Just making sure you don't vanish into your own head," she murmured. He didn't shift her away. Their quarters felt less like a battlefield and more like a strange equilibrium. Kale teased, Darius endured, and beneath it all stretched a tension neither of them quite named. But Kale, restless as ever, didn't want balance. She wanted escalation. The night it happened, she was in rare form, edgy, bright, more incorrigible than usual. Every time he adjusted his blanket, she tugged it with her tail. Every time he closed his eyes, a finger jabbed his ribs. "You're impossible," he said, rolling toward her. "You love it," she whispered from the edge of his bunk, eyes shining. His patience snapped, not with anger, but with a kind of exasperated amusement. He reached for her wrist, only meaning to still her hand. She slipped back, quick as ever, ears flicking in triumph. And his hand closed on something else entirely, warm, alive, impossibly soft. His fingers sank into thick fur. Kale went rigid. Her golden eyes blew wide, shock wiping every trace of mischief from her face. He realized a fraction too late what he'd grabbed, her tail. The playful war between them vanished in an instant. The fur under his palm felt like silk, heat pulsing through it, sending his heartbeat skittering. For a breath he didn't move, mind scrambling to catch up. Her tail rested in his grasp, its weight and warmth pressed into his hand. Kale didn't laugh. Her ears pinned flat to her skull, her eyes were wide and bare. The fox woman who always had a quip, who never lost ground to silence, sat frozen. Her tail trembled faintly in his grip, an exposed, fragile thing he had never seen from her. He released her at once, snatching his hand back as if burned. "Kale, I didn't." She pressed her lips together, ears twitching, cheeks flushing beneath that red hair. "You grabbed my tail." "It was an accident," he said quickly. "I reached for your hand. You moved and I—" Her gaze dropped to the floor, gold eyes catching the low light. For once, there was no smirk waiting for him. She drew her tail in, wrapping it around herself like a shield. The silence stretched until he shifted, uneasy. "I'm sorry." Kale swallowed. "Humans don't know. You couldn't know." "Know what?" Her ears flicked, she shook her head. "Forget it." She rolled onto her bunk to face the wall, tail curled tight and close. The shift was unmistakable. The barracks, once full of her humming, her chatter, her relentless laughter, fell into a heavy quiet. Kale still did everything by the book: patrol, mess, drills. But at night she didn't poke his side, didn't drape herself across his bunk, didn't steal his rations with a grin. Her tail no longer brushed his arm in passing. Darius told himself this was what he'd wanted: peace, routine, sleep without interruption. Yet each night he lay awake, tracing cracks on the ceiling and wishing for her whisper, the soft tap of her tail against the bunk frame. On a dusk patrol, sand crunching under their boots, he tried to speak. "Kale." She kept her eyes forward. "I said forget it." The words were sharp, but her voice faltered halfway through. She tugged her scarf higher, ears flat beneath her hood. Darius clenched his jaw and fell silent. 3 nights later, something gave. He woke to the faint scrape of movement and found her sitting at the edge of her bunk, tail wrapped tight around her knees, staring into nothing. "Can't sleep?" he asked softly. Her ears twitched. "Doesn't matter." He sat up, forearms on his knees. "You've been different since you grabbed me," she finished, voice taut. "I told you it wasn't on purpose." "I know." A long pause. Knowing doesn't change how it felt. The admission hit harder than any fight. He watched the line of her jaw in the dim light, hidden behind a fall of red hair. "What did it feel like?" he asked carefully. Her shoulders went stiff. He thought she wouldn't answer. Then, barely above a breath, "Too close." "Close, in a bad way," he frowned. "Close in a way I wasn't ready for," she said, ears angling back. Kale, bold Kale, who lived to push every boundary, had been the one shaken by his accidental touch. When she lay down again, tail curled in tight protection, Darius stared at the shifting shadows across the ceiling, chest aching with guilt, confusion, and the sharp realization that her absence hurt more than her chaos ever had. He wanted to fix it. He just didn't know how. The next afternoon, after drills, Lurox clapped him on the shoulder. "What's wrong with Kale? She hasn't cracked a joke in a week. You break her spirit, human." "She's tired," Darius said, forcing neutrality. "Not Kale." Lurox narrowed his eyes. "She's fire. Something put it out." When Kale passed them, eyes forward, tail held stiff, Darius knew Lurox was right. That night, as she turned onto her side, he spoke into the dark. "You don't owe me an explanation," he said quietly. "But I don't want to lose what we had, even if it was just you keeping me awake every night." Silence. Then a faint rustle beneath her blanket. "You're stubborn," she murmured. "Occupational hazard." He waited for her laugh. It didn't come. But her tail flicked once before curling in again. Not much, but something. The tension hung like static you could feel on your skin. Kale moved with the same crisp efficiency, but the playful edges were dulled. No sly commentary during meals, no tail against his arm in the corridor. Her silence carried more weight than her laughter ever had. Darius kept glancing her way, waiting for a quip to break the spell. It never came. Each quiet day convinced him he'd broken something essential. On a night patrol beneath a pale scatter of stars, he tried once more. "Kale," he said into the sand crunch and scanner hum, I owe you better than silence. If I cross the line, tell me how to make it right. She stopped. Her tail twitched once, then curled low. Wind whispered across the flats. Finally she looked over, starlight catching in her eyes. You didn't cross it on purpose, she said. But that doesn't mean it wasn't crossed. I didn't mean. I know. Her voice softened. It's not about intent. It's about what it means. She moved on, leaving him to follow. The truth arrived later, when exhaustion pressed them both flat. Kale sat on the floor with her back to the bunk, tail looped tightly in her lap. Darius leaned against the opposite wall, afraid a wrong word would push her father away. In my culture, she said at last, voice low, you don't touch a tail casually. It's private. Intimate. No one touches it unless they are trusted. He straightened. And I? You startled me, she cut in. Her ears flicked back, then forward, as if she was arguing with herself. Because I didn't expect it. And because it didn't feel wrong. The final word slipped out like a confession. She pressed her lips together, as if she wished she could grab it back. Kale. Forget it, she said quickly, standing and brushing at spotless armor. Humans don't think about tails like that. It doesn't matter. But it did. He saw it in the tremor of her hands, in the way she dodged his eyes. For days, she walked a careful border between distance and nearness. She sat beside him in the mess but didn't tease. She joined his patrols but kept her words clipped. At night she didn't jab his ribs, but he heard her breathing, restless, uneven. One night she whispered into the dark, almost inaudible, you ruined my games. I didn't mean to ruin anything, he said, turning toward her silhouette. That's the problem. Her tail flicked, restless. You caught me off guard, and I don't know what to do with that. Then maybe we figure it out together, he answered. She turned her face toward him, amber eyes faintly aglow. No smirk. No mask. Only something bare and real. She didn't reply, but her tail loosened from its tight knot around her legs. The next day, during weapons checks, their fingers brushed reaching for the same power cell. She froze, ears twitching, and pulled back. Sorry. Don't be, he said, holding her gaze. Her ears reddened, she busied herself with her rifle. But the flick of her tail told him the words had landed deeper than she wanted. After a brutal week, they lingered outside the barracks beneath the chill stars. You humans are strange, she said suddenly. How so? You break something and then spend all your time trying to mend it, even when it wasn't really broken. She glanced at him, eyes softer now. We just walk away. Maybe that's why we survive, he said. We don't let go that easily. Her ears tilted, considering. Then, almost too quiet, maybe that's why I haven't walked away either. That night, for the first time in weeks, she hummed. The tune was slower than her usual playful rhythm, warm enough to loosen the ache in his chest. He realized, drifting towards sleep, that her humming wasn't to keep him awake anymore. It was to tell him she was still there. The thaw came gradually, like frost giving way under a patient dawn. Kale's teasing returned, lighter now, measured. She still stole his rations, still commandeered his bunk, still hummed while he tried to rest. But her eyes lingered longer, her tail stayed closer, and the silences between them felt expectant rather than heavy. Something was coming. They both felt it. One evening the outpost fell quiet, no drills, no patrols. Most squads drifted toward noise and distraction. Kale stayed, stretched across her bunk, tail swaying lazily in the dim light. You're brooding again, she murmured. I'm thinking. Same thing, she said, rolling to face him. Humans think too much. Vulpines feel. And where does that get you? A faint smile. In trouble. Usually. Silence settled, charged, not awkward. Her tail curled and uncurled. Darius leaned back against the wall and failed not to stare. Do you know why I reacted the way I did? She asked at last. When you grabbed me. His throat tightened. You said it was private. It's more than that. Her gaze held his, fierce, even as her voice gentled. It's trust. It's connection. We don't let just anyone touch us there. Not comrades. Not friends. Only someone who matters. He swallowed. I didn't mean to. I know. Her ears dipped. And that's why it shook me. Not because I hated it, because I didn't. The words flared between them, bright and undeniable. Kale gripped the edge of her blanket. I like teasing you. I like making you flustered. But in that moment, it stopped being a game. It was real, and I didn't know how to face it. Darius stepped closer, slow, deliberate. She didn't move away. If it meant that much, he said softly, then I'm glad it was me, even by accident. Her eyes widened, her ears twitched. You mean that? Yes. His voice was steady, though his pulse hammered. You matter to me. She searched his face for a long, quiet moment. Then her tail uncoiled, slid across the space, and came to rest against his leg, not teasing, not coy, just present. Her smile, when it came, was the softest he'd ever seen. Good. Because I think I like you, soldier boy, more than I should. He almost laughed, relief flooding through him. More than you should, he teased. Humans and vulpines don't make easy pairs, she said, though her grin betrayed her. But maybe you're stubborn enough to make it work. The weeks of tight-held tension dissolved into warmth. She brushed her fingers against his arm and leaned in until her forehead rested against his chest. Her tail wrapped gently around his waist, drawing him close. Do you regret being stationed here? She asked later, tail coiled at his ankle. I did, he admitted. Not anymore. Her ears twitched, her smile curved. Good answer. Another night she rolled onto his bunk and, instead of sprawling, curled into him, tail looped around them both. You always complain I steal your warmth, she murmured against his chest. So I'm sharing it properly. His hand settled on her shoulder, steady. Not complaining. She purred, low, content, the sound thrumming through them both. Her mischief didn't vanish, it changed. During drills, she circled him like a predator, tail flicking. You're distracted, she teased. You're distracting, he said. Exactly. She darted past with a wink. But the intent was different now. Her games didn't test his patience, they held him close, stitching herself into every part of his day. After a sandstorm buried the outpost in dust, they stood on the rooftop, watching stars emerge through thinning haze. You humans look at the sky like it's something to conquer, she said. Vulpines look at it like it's something to share. She turned to him, tail brushing his side. That's why I tease, to make you look at me, not the war or the sky or everything else. You never had to try so hard, he said, voice tight. You already had my attention. Her ears flushed red, her grin softened. Careful, soldier boy. Say things like that and I'll think you're as stubborn about me as you are about everything else. I am. The quiet that followed was full rather than empty. By the next patrol rotation, it was impossible to picture the outpost without her at his side. Even Captain Arden raised a brow pairing them again. Strange. I expected complaints about shared quarters. Instead, you two never ask for reassignment. Maybe we like each other more than we admit, Kale said, smirking. Outside, Darius muttered, you had to say it out loud. What? It's true. Her tail flicked, smug. And I like making you squirm. That night, she curled against him without jokes or jabs, just quiet contentment. Darius knew, then, that whatever this was, he didn't want it to end with deployment. Days blurred into something steady, almost like home despite the rattling walls and the hum of war. He measured time by Kale, the weight of her tail around his leg as she slept, the way her laughter cut through the bleakness, the look in her eyes when she thought he wasn't watching. It wasn't easy. Patrols grew harsher, drones more aggressive, supplies thinner. But through all of it, they carried each other. After a brutal skirmish, they limped back to quarters bruised and dust-caked. Kale collapsed with a groan, tail flopping limp. You're reckless, he said, more worry than reprimand. Charging 3 drones like that. She managed a faint grin. I knew you'd cover me. You're gambling with your life. No, she said, pushing up on her elbows, meeting his gaze. I'm trusting you. There's a difference. He let out a slow breath. She smiled, softer, and let her tail brush his boots. Word spread. Mara teased him in the infirmary. Lurox called Kale the human's shadow. Even Arden eyed them when assigning routes. You two work well together. Make sure that doesn't change. It's why we work well, Kale replied, and Arden walked off muttering about impossible vulpines. One evening outside the walls, sharing rations beneath starlight, she leaned back on her hands, tail draped loosely across his lap. I don't care what they say, she murmured. Vulpines don't hide who we choose. And I've chosen. Her grin curved sharp, her eyes were warm. You're mine now, soldier boy. Possessive, aren't you? He said. She leaned close, ears brushing his temple, voice a low whisper. Absolutely. After that, she was bolder even in public, tail curling protectively around him in the mess, shoulder pressed into his during long briefings. At night she claimed his bunk more often than her own, wrapped around him like a shield. He wondered if he should resist. The thought never lasted. The truth was simple, he didn't want distance anymore. On a quiet, wind-lashed night, she shifted against him, voice barely above a breath. Do you know what scared me most? What? When you grabbed my tail. I liked it too much. Her ears flicked nervously. I thought it meant I was weak. That I'd lost control of my games. He rested a steady hand on her shoulder. It didn't make you weak. It made us honest. Her tail tightened around him in answer, a silent vow. Then I don't want to play games anymore, she whispered. Not with you. The future stayed uncertain. Deployments end, wars move people like pieces. But beneath the flicker of ration lights and the warmth of her quiet humming, Darius knew they'd carved something out of the chaos worth carrying forward. When Kale finally drifted off, curled into him, tail wrapped secure around his waist, he let himself relax fully for the first time since setting foot on Pharaoh's 9. She had teased him, tested him, pushed every boundary, and in the end, she had chosen him. As his eyes slipped closed, one thought settled, steady and sure. She teased me through the night. Now her warmth, her laughter, her trust. They are mine.